Hi, and welcome back to AppSecCon 2022. In this next panel discussion, we're going to talk about securing the software supply chain with SBOMs. We've got three great speakers. We've got Cassie Crossley, VP and Deputy Product Security Officer with Product and System Security Office at Schneider Electric. We've got Caleb Quern, Director at KPMG of Cybersecurity Systems, and Alan Friedman, Senior Advisor and Strategist at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a great session, some really insightful insights around SBOMs. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Hi, I'm Alan Friedman from CISA. I'm the guy who doesn't shut up about SBOM. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is diving into the idea of a software bill of materials and ultimately talking about how you can get involved with your organization. I'm joined by two longtime SBOM experts and really leaders in the community to help things move forward, Cassie Crossley and Caleb Quern. Cassie, you want to just tell folks how you got involved?
Sure. I'm from Schneider Electric, and I am a vice president in our product and system security office. So customer transparency, software bill of materials, really that software supply chain security is a passion for me. And that's why I've been involved in the topic for a couple of years now.
Caleb?
So I'm Caleb Quern. I'm a director with KPMG's cybersecurity consulting practice. And I guess I'm involved because, my job is making it easier for chief information security officers and CIOs to reduce risk as they build things across the software development lifecycle. And of course, a big component of that these days means being able to have faith in the things that the open source components that we bring in the door. So that's why I'm here and how I've been involved over the past few years.
Thank you. So super excited to have both of you here. But maybe before we dive in and start to pluck out some of your expertise, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page about what a software bill of materials is. So hopefully you've heard of it by now. One of the ideas that I like to say is, if you go to the store and you buy a Twinkie, it's going to come with a little list of ingredients that tells you what's in this. And for me, it's quite baffling that we have this level of transparency in a tasty, if not very biodegradable snack, but we don't have a similar level of transparency in the software that runs our critical infrastructure, that runs our government, and that runs our organizations. And that really is the idea to say, let me understand not how to make software, but what are the components that it's built on. Right. Modern software is assembled out of existing pieces. Caleb mentioned open source, so that's a big part of it. And a lot of the risks that we face aren't for a particular piece of software, but they're from automated or targeted attacks against some underlying component and some weakness in that. Now, SBOM can really affect you across the entire life cycle of software. It can help developers, right? You need to know what you ship. It can help people who are selecting software, buying software, to understand the potential risk of a new project on their network. And of course, once you're operating a system, you need to know, am I affected by a new risk? And the last thing I'll flag is a core part of this is automation. Right? If we're doing this manually, it won't work. In 2022, all security efforts really should be driven towards automation. And a big part of SBOM is building on two existing data formats, SPDX and CycloneDX, both out in the marketplace today. And both of them enable us to communicate basic SBOMs in a fairly standardized, uniform way. So with that said, I'm giving you sort of the basics, but all of that is sort of still very descriptive. Cassie and Caleb, I want to get into what's the current state of the marketplace today, right? Is everything I just said, is that aspirational, or can we do that? Let's start with Caleb.
Sure. Great to talk with you both. I'm so happy to be here. I think directly to answer your question, Alan, what is the current state? I think, wow, it's night and day from, say, today, from a year ago and 12 months ago when we started to talk about this. And I'm sure we all feel this when we're out talking to collaborators and stakeholders about this, that they may have heard of it before now. Right? Now when we have the conversation, they say, oh, I think I know what that is. Or maybe they even really know what it is. That's night and day. And that's a big improvement. I'll take that anytime. I still think we have a long way to go. I'm sure we'll get into that on the talk today as well. I think the vendor community, which is exciting because they're a major kind of piece of the solution, the broader vision that is going to be required to get this where we all want it to go together, they are all engaged for good reasons. And they're all ready to support with their nascent or existing SBOM capabilities. So that's, I think, a difference in the last 12 months. What about you, Cassie?
Well, I come from a development world, and understanding what you put into your software. If you go to any software group, any development team, they can say, oh yeah, the build manager knows what's in it, right? That's, we've got a list. We can figure out if you have any questions, but that doesn't give all the visibility that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I think that just as developers, we have and have known that it's really, wow, somebody needs to know what I've been doing and where this is all coming from. So that's going to be pretty interesting to talk for. But I think that we've got a good grounding. And as Caleb said, there's vendors. I could have 8 different ways to generate a SBOM right now. If you're part of your build pipeline, if it's part of your DevSecOps, if it's, or if it's part of a SCA tool, there's so many ways, that's great. And we're so much farther than we were. And I agree with Caleb on that.
So always fun to look behind us and see all the progress that we've made. What's still hard? Both of you have alluded to the idea that, hey, maybe this isn't a completely solved problem, a completely mature technology. What's hard, and what are some of the things that you think we as a community need to tackle? Let's start with Cassie.
I think from a larger standpoint, it has been very much a black box, as you mentioned earlier. That black box and how it went into it could have been many years, decades. I have code that's in paint.exe from the late 80s. So I know that there's a couple lines probably on your Windows system that I wrote. And how, how can you go back in time to make sure it is? So we're just at a high level, we understand SBOMs looking at that, what's in my current component list. But when you think about how large some of these systems are, even just your cell phone, the number of lines and number of apps and number of potential SBOMs in a cell phone alone is pretty big. And so I think that the developers who built that over time, or even the ones that sit in those roles today, do not know the decisions are made, and maybe you're running code that should be deprecated, that should be removed, that isn't doing anything. And all of a sudden you're having to answer, why am I running this piece of code? Because someone's now asking you, why are you running? So I think that transparency is going to make a larger difference, where you might have had 10% of obsolete or unused code, and you're going to have to explain why, because it could be a potential risk. And they've not had those questions before. And that's part of the new world that we're going to be seeing.
I love that, which is to say, hey, even just planning for those questions is going to lead to a better internal process. Mm-hmm. Caleb, what's hard? What do we need to work on?
I think the recognition was like step 0. Where we are today, wonderful, big advancement, night and day, like we said. But what's hard is the rest. We're just beginning this journey that I think we all have relatively clear ideas on, but maybe not completely clear ideas on. Some of the things I know large organizations struggle with is just scanning everything and generating the SBOM. That's like getting that done is a big deal. And I don't want to minimize or underestimate the work involved in that simple operational task of generation of SBOMs. What I hope doesn't happen, maybe it's happening a little bit out there, is that we declare victory and move on once we've generated some SBOMs and we move on to the next shiny thing. Because now that we've got them, I think this is the real question: is what do we do? Like, what is the value to all of the different stakeholder groups across the organization with an SBOM? And that's a big conversation. But I think, what's hard about it is, some maybe at the operational level, there's that sense that, we've generated the SBOMs, or our source code management platform has done it for us. We're good to go, right? And I think that's just where, that you're enabled to make use of the value that is now revealed, now that you have the visibility. So I would say we've got, what's hard is enabling other teams like our threat intelligence teams, who could benefit from knowing the most important open source things that we use and consume in our environment. Get them engaged. Go ahead, Alan.
Can you give me sort of, hey, what's a short-term use case that you think we'll achieve in the near term, and what's a more ambitious use case that you can imagine we could do if we have some really good innovation and maybe one of our listeners starts a new company?
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and I'd love to hear Cassie's thoughts. But so pulling on that thread I began, let's imagine that we have that, I'll just say simply like a pie chart, a distribution of all of the most important things that we have across our portfolio now that we've rationalized all of our SBOMs together. Wow, with that insight, we can do things like inform the threat intel people of what to keep an eye out for, and start crafting queries to light up our security operations center down the hall when something is awry, like a Log4j incident. And from there, I would love to see like the CIO's organization use that same information to better plan what open source packages we should double down on and which ones we should move away from because they're not good uses of our time. There's a long list of use cases to jump into, but what do you think, Cassie?
Well, I definitely, a short-term use case, I think that having the collection of SBOMs, especially internally, because we're both a consumer and a producer. So being a consumer and having a full, CERT team vulnerability management organization is being able to respond quickly. When something comes out, how can we best direct and have our hundreds of project teams really be able to do quick analysis to say, yes, you may need to investigate further. So just saving the amount of hours and being able to respond quickly and reducing the length of time to be able to respond quickly, that use case is already developing and we've seen improvements by having that data. So Log4j, we're going to talk about it and use that word a couple times today. And being able to quickly identify at least where to go from a heat map standpoint of which offers. We saw the same things when there were different OSs last year. Are we using these, especially for embedded products? You're going to have the same thing from different areas in the SaaS and areas, that kind of the world. From a more extended use case, I would say that the distribution model and understanding your customers better is going to be helpful. Is having this conversation about transparency and SBOM has put that touch point with the customer so much closer. It's like, why do you need this? How are you going to use this? And to take on what Caleb was saying is they're not quite sure how to always use it either. It can be the shiny object this year, but if they're really going to go further with it, it's what value are they going to get? And I love Alan to describe what VEX is and sort of that relationship that we're starting to see between SBOM just gives you a list. Yeah, we know it has, this object in it. But do we have to worry about that? And that's, I think, the next step.
Thanks, Cassie. And I think you hit on a really important point, which is, right, SBOM's a data layer. And so one, we're going to need to, as Caleb said, sort of turn that into intelligence, right? Which can then drive action, as Cassie noted. But also there are going to be times where data is nice, but I don't need all the data. I just want you to tell me something about your software. So sort of the attestation model. I'm going to assert this. And one of the real challenges around having increased transparency is that not all vulnerabilities actually put a product or an organization at risk. And so there's a horribly named project, but I think that is incredible potential called VEX. And I named it, so it's my fault. VEX stands for the Vulnerability, Exploitability, and Exchange. And it's basically a way for an organization to make an attestation that says this product is or is not affected by this vulnerability. So, all right, imagine how much easier all of our jobs would be for Log4j if our upstream suppliers had said, hey, super quick machine readable attestation that says we're not affected by Log4j, or we are, and here's the patch. Instead of having to crawl through everyone's website, or alternatively going to the handy CISA GitHub, which listed, the thousands of suppliers and thousands of subsequent products. So that's one of the core ideas around attestation. Now, before we go, hopefully we've gotten a few folks who are watching us to say, this seems good. What do I do? So how can folks get started? How can they roll up their sleeves and make this a reality for their organization? Cassie, can we start with you?
Yes. Well, it depends quite a bit on where your organization is sitting, whether you're a producer or a consumer. I would say that the best area to start with is to go to the NIST/SBOM. I'm sure that many of you...
NTIA.
NTIA, sorry. The NTIA SBOM website and also CISA websites on that. I am continuously driving people to that site. And the reason I'm doing that is we're still in our learning journey. So I think that if you're a developer, there's some information there. And if you are a developer who's really into it, there's other places to go to get some more detail. There's been some activities and such that are going through where we've done some plug fests and get really into it. I would also, if you are let's say someone who wants to consume these, there's information on there, but talk specifically with the manufacturers and who's providing it to see what channels that they have for providing the content. If I'm talking with a customer and they say, here's what I'm going to do with it, my answer could be a bit different rather than I want to adjust this because I brand label your product and I want to be able to provide it on. So.
Thanks. No, it's super helpful. And I also want to flag something you said, which is earlier you said, you're both a recipient of inbound data and you ship stuff. And I think it's important to remember that we're all in the supply chain and most of us are in the middle. And so that means that we're going to need to sort of understand how to receive it as well as how to produce this kind of data. Caleb, what, we've got some folks that want to make this happen in their organization. How should they start?
Sure. I can't do much better than Cassie's answer. One nuance I might jump on or pull on a little bit would be the consumer versus producer differentiation and, what our organizations do for the outside world. I think regardless of whether or not the thing that we're building is meant for an outside audience, we've seen tremendous value in an SBOM program only for the things that we build for ourselves in large organizations. And I'm sure that was implied, but I don't have much else to add beyond Cassie's answer.
Great. So as we sort of wrap up our time today, I was wondering, let's talk about sort of the big picture here. Why is this important to get right? And what are some of the benefits that will happen if folks out there say, hey, yeah, this seems not interesting. I want to implement it, but I also want to help in sort of a global community to build this out? Are there some things you can say, hey, this is what's at stake if we get this right versus if we do it poorly?
Yeah, I'll start. What's at stake is that when we are really opening ourselves up to other folks, we need them to understand this is a starting point. We're going to have errors. We're going to not get it right. We may not provide the right level of information to begin with. And this is not the end game. I fully expect in 3-4 years from now, we're going to have so many more answers than we do today. It'll be more automated, digitized. This is very manual. But you shouldn't stop you from starting. If you request it and your supplier may say, I can't give it to you now. Your dev team may say, I don't want to give all this information yet. And so I want to anonymize some of it. And you need to realize that there's there's a lot of grayness right now, and that's okay. It's all starting part of the process. So, we didn't create regulations before the seatbelt was ever invented. The regulations on using a seatbelt were after it was invented. So we're going to have a lot more to do here.
Sure. I'll jump on. So I think what's at stake, I mean, among other things, Alan Friedman's sanity. Like he's worked so hard for so many years here. Joking aside, I think anything we can do in our large organizations, in smaller organizations as well, to reduce risk as we build things, products, systems, and put them into production, the less likelihood or impact we have of a cybersecurity event. That increases the likelihood that we have investment and resources internally to do bigger and better things and grow. And when these large organizations that we're talking about and talking to on the call today can grow and innovate, that means better prosperity, better opportunity for people all around the world. I think that's what's really at stake and why SBOMs are important.
Thank you. And I think that's a really nice holistic perspective. The last thing I'm going to say is I see this as the beginning. We don't really know the full power of what we can do with this data. The analogy I think might be the creation of CVE almost 20 years ago, which is to say, giving a vulnerability a number doesn't do anything, doesn't protect your network, doesn't protect your users. But once we have that shared frame of reference and that shared data platform, we now have an entire industry or industries that have built and innovated and found better ways to help people secure their software and produce more quality software. And so, again, I'm going to make a quick plug to those of you who sort of are on the innovation side of the house. Think about what you could do with this data. I think there are a lot of organizations going to make a lot of progress and be looking for help in both generating and consuming this. So with that, I'd like to thank Cassie and Caleb for joining us today. And we hope that you'll understand that SBOM is going to be an important part of Team Purple moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.